What is up, everybody?
Sup,
Happy
sup.
Mental Health Monday. We got ourselves a guest here today. We got our buddy Easy with us today. Eric,
What's up,
whatever,
guys?
whatever you want to call him.
Easy.
He's going to talk to us about a little health and wellness today. I know you've dropped a lot of good advice my way in the short amount of time we've known each other.
It's all intentional, but yeah, I don't know exactly where to begin because there's so much that you can talk about it. So it's interesting. We'll just kind of let the topic unfold. Yeah. I've seen a few episodes. So any place that you guys want to start in particular, and I'm also, what's up, Shep?
What's up, bro?
Chilling. It's been a Monday.
Yeah,
But feeling pretty good.
I feel that.
Yeah.
My Monday's been all right. Had some crazy work news going down that had everybody hype all day. I got out of there, but I was more concerned about a vacation I got coming up and stuff like that. It's like, I better be able to take this vacation because it's like less than 12 days that I got scheduled out. So
yeah,
nice.
But I sat back and been looking at the musics and shit like that, bro. For Johnny Cash, I got a lot of shit lined up when you break it down. So I was like, that's a lot. That's cool. About
awesome.
three things about to drop, I guess, in the next by the end of the year, I guess.
When I've heard a few of those things, I think that you're
Oh, yeah.
talking about. And so I know at least a couple of them are bangers, at least what I've heard so far. So I'll be excited for that too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was looking at the next mixtape I was going to do and realized all but one song I've already released. So I was like, oh, well, shit, on here and shit, on some of them was on the Chase and Shep one. Some of them I just threw out and all this shit over time because it's been 3 years I've been doing it.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, damn, I might as well finish that last song and put the whole thing out as one. Like
I better, late than never.
I need to take down the song I put up this morning because I'm not happy with it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was more like I'd been up since 3:00 in the morning and worked on it for 4 hours. I'm like, yeah, this is good. And then I put it out and then I went back with it. I went back and was listening to it. And I'm like, this ain't finished. This ain't finished at all.
Ain't finished is different than not good though.
Right. True.
It's
on its way. It's on its way.
No, yeah. I mean, sometimes with music, that's the key. That's the kicker that you got to do is you got to walk away and come back because you'd be listening to the same thing for a few hours.
Yeah.
It all blends together, and you're like, it's great.
I had the total opposite of that with that Texas Chainsaw song. That was one that, like, the longer I sat there, and I was working on it before he came and picked me up yesterday. I was getting so frustrated because I was like, I just can't figure out like what this is supposed to sound like. And then by the time I played it for you, by the time I came back home yesterday, I was like, oh yeah, this is fine. this is good. But yeah, it definitely helps to take a step back. We talked about on whole Mental Health Monday before.
Sometimes that works too. Sometimes you come back to something that you thought sounded nasty, and it's like, okay, I didn't notice what sounded nasty this go through, so maybe I was just listening too deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just it shows the two sides of having to step back sometimes, because sometimes you think something's just the best and it's not, and you need to, take a step back. We were talking on perspective a little bit earlier.
Yeah, you're actually a perfect segue because I was thinking it. We had just talked about this. I've done a lot of things in mental health, and a friend of mine who is a nutritional therapist. Her job is to essentially try and find the link between what we put into our bodies and what effect it has, like, on your brain. I was just talking to her not too recently because she's one of the few people I've met in a professional environment who advocates for play super regularly. She's like, starting with the premise, we're apes or ape-like. Like, play has been a thing that's helped us develop thought and like creativity, and if we don't engage in that, we're like seriously cutting off basically half of what the brain's kind of designed to do, which is just mess around. So that's why I was kind of hyping her up, because that's part of that perspective thing. You can't always be on the hustle, whether that looks like the hustle or whether that hustle is art. You can't always be like on. You have to have a break from it in some sort of release and play.
Well, perspective is a crazy thing to get into and think about.
Yeah,
whenever I've always talked about with perspective with people over the years, I've always brought up the fact that, like, you know, we all know how the world is because of our perception of the world. So you got to think, if you were born on top of a mountain and your family was secluded and that's all you was doing was seeing your mountain out in the middle of nowhere and wilderness and hunting every day and doing this and that. What's up, Corey? Um,
Oh shit.
if that's all you knew your entire life was that fishing, hunting, doing all that, and then somebody from the world came and found you and then they ask what your perception of the planet is, you'd probably be like, this is a beautiful place and harmony and all this stuff, because you don't know the big world outside.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So perception is always a crazy thing, because if we start looking at perception on certain things, then like as society, in my opinion, like then you got to look at like the bad that we consider bad, but be able to say, but that person's perception of reality might be true to them. So does that make it wrong?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about perspective is that it shifts. Like, there's several different scales to reality. Like, you could look at things super, super small, you know, molecular. You could look at also things on the scale of like the universe, and any which way in between. And it's like perspective tends to, I mean, change the truth a little bit depending on like where and how you look at it. That was kind of all I wanted to point out.
No, yeah, well,
there's just like the scale is important, and I think a lot of people might miss the right scale for what they're trying to do. When people are like, "My life is meaningless and nothing matters," and because we're all just going to end up in some sort of cosmic goop, it's like that's correct from one scale, but from the scale at which like you're experiencing life, that's totally not true. Why would your own experience not matter? It's like kind of shifting, because you can literally look at anything from any perspective and kind of create an argument to not do something,
right,
or to do something foolish.
True.
Yeah.
I coming off of my little Saul marathon. You know, there's honestly, oddly enough, quite a lot of mental health to dissect there in the Saul movies, and specifically with perspective, because my big takeaway this time around, watching these movies this time around,
Cheers.
Is the fact that like this whole time Jigsaw is constantly just like, I've never killed anybody, I despise murderers, and they're like, about like 3 movies in, I'm like, I don't know, man. That argument doesn't fly with me. It's like, okay, sure, you have not actually killed somebody. And in his head, his argument, like he truly believes he is doing good work. He truly believes that he is teaching people how to appreciate their lives more and stuff like that. And you know, these other and it's interesting to see, you know, some of the people who go through it. You got the people who kind of fall into this cult that follow Jigsaw now, and then you have these other people whose lives were not changed, and they're just like, what the fuck was I supposed to learn from this? I cut my arm off, you know. And like, it's like, oh well, I guess you just didn't get the lesson. And it's just like it is oddly a lesson on perspective for sure, because yeah, definitely by the end of that series I'm like, homie, you can't tell me you don't feel like you killed maybe somebody in one of these traps. He's like, y'all do it to yourselves. It's like they didn't put themselves in these traps. But just saying, it's a good example on perspective.
I mean, you know, like we see it all the time in the superhero movies and whatnot. You know, a lot of the villains that you got, they don't necessarily think what they're doing is bad. They think, you know, like I would say someone like Poison Ivy. I don't feel like what she is doing, she would consider bad. And from a certain perspective, maybe not. From a plant's perspective, no, it's not bad. Eliminate the humans that are killing you, ain't bad.
Yeah.
But from our perspective, yeah, it's kind of fucked up, man. So like,
go ahead.
Like, just generally there's the idiom, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Like, most people think they're doing kind of the right thing most of the time, and it's like, even not just in their own lives but in pop culture. Like, take Magneto, and I've seen several X-Men things where I'm like, he's making pretty reasonable, he's like, leave us alone, don't attempt, like, we have our own separate thing. And people are like, nah, fam, we can't stop doing that. And he's like, all right, so then we've got beef.
Yeah.
Seems totally reasonable to me. Like he was just like, we're trying to do the whole, not that Magneto doesn't step over the line a bunch, but like right there, at some point he was
Right.
like, good intention. He was just trying to take care of what he thought was like a persecuted, the mutants who totally were, and the sewer dwellers. Like, didn't always get a sympathetic ear.
Yeah. That's what's kind of interesting about pop culture, especially like in the superhero like landscape these days, and even like back in the day in comics and stuff. People always want to paint the picture like here's good, here's evil, even within the superhero world, and it's just not like that. And, we've seen a lot of stuff lately, like Falcon and Winter Soldier, and everything that's like operates in this morally gray area. That's like exactly what we're talking on. Is the good guys are sometimes doing bad things because they think it's what's right, or vice versa. The bad guys are doing good things because it's what they think is right. And it's definitely interesting. I think it makes people think a little more on that. The world's not so black and white all the time.
Nah, it ain't. It ain't at all. I like that. They were showing the negative effects of the heroes. As far as like, we knew Captain America was this baller, and here's all these people that have taken after him, so we're going to experiment on him and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Because I think a big thing that a lot of people don't understand is just like we're saying, with being positive and shit, there is, to me, such a thing as it going into like sort of a toxic territory towards people, especially when I don't know, man. Like I don't like to gloat and stuff on the social media and stuff. I feel like it can play a role if you put all your greatest moments in life up on there, and people aren't having those moments and are down. I think it keeps that cycle going for other people, but I don't know, man. It's a line. I think there's a line, but
I hear what you're saying. Too much positivity can be a bad thing. It's too much of a good thing. Sort of deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, even like what we were saying, like, even if you're trying to live a really good life with good intentions and doing what you think is right, and maybe you are, like, I feel like that the downside can still, be there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you could be living a good life and never, maybe. And I don't think people should be looking at other people's lives and judging their own off that. But I'm saying that's something that does indeed happen.
Well, there's,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're kind of, I think, hitting around some interesting points. I think you mentioned toxic positivity, and
Yeah.
I think that's just when people are probably, there's such a thing as like looking at the world positively, but there's also just denial, lying, straight up being like everything's okay when it's like you have evidence that it isn't. Like
it's the optimist versus realist situation.
And you can be realistic and happy,
right?
But I don't think you can. I think a lot of times people want to think of mental health, positivity, a lot of this stuff as just like a switch you hit and you just kind of make things better. But it's a lot of actually sustained work. It's figuring out what's important to you and then like actually applying yourself in that direction. And there's a lot of interesting books on this subject. There's one called Drive by Daniel Pink, I believe. And the big kind of thing that he hits on is most people aren't super thrilled because they're doing stuff that they don't like and find meaning in. And then we're being managed in a way that's like management. The whole concept is like literally harkens from like essentially slavery to feudalism. Like it's this idea that people don't want to do anything, so they must be coerced and managed. Right. And it's like, that's wrong. People want to do things generally. It's just they don't want to do things that suck. They don't want to do things that are a waste of their time or useless. And it's really hard to disengage from that, find something you like, and then like go towards it because it's, there's so many things in place that make kind of a paycheck's a really hard addiction to kick.
No, I feel like that we're seeing that right now, like that thought process at a national level with everybody out of work with the unemployment, and then you have the whole group of people that are like they're lazy, they just don't want to work, they're just taking advantage of the system type thing. That's the thing that I've been talking with people the last couple of days about, because it's like the way I look at it, and I'm somebody that's worked this whole time throughout the whole pandemic. You know what I'm saying? My job did not shut down. I feel like I was fortunate enough to do so. But I was like, man, my whole life growing up, they teach you, as a kid, they're like, you get a good education, you go to college, you get a degree, you'll get a good job, you'll have a good life, you'll get a house, you'll get married, you'll be able to go on vacations once a year, this and that. And that was never a reality for all of us. You grew up, you did that. You did exactly how they said. That you played the game, and then you got out of college and there wasn't really any job because we've improved technology and all this stuff throughout the years, and other jobs have went away. So all those people that once had careers, well, they've flooded off into these other ones while all these people are at school. You get done, well, it's already taken up. And then like, I just lost my train of thought. I've been doing this lately.
Well, actually, everything you're saying, I actually read a really great article on this either this morning or last night. That was basically, everybody's thing right now is like they assume it's the unemployment benefits, and so people are trying to get that shut down. It's like, oh well, people don't want to come back to work because they're getting paid so much in unemployment benefits and blah 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 blah. But this article was breaking it down, and it's like, is that really why people aren't coming back to work? And
No,
it really got into it about like a lot of the people aren't taking advantage of that. I mean, a lot of people would want to be working, but there are also situations where you've got people who have kids who aren't in school anymore, like they're still doing remote learning and stuff like that. Okay, well, who's going to watch these kids if I have to go get a job there? Or you got people like myself who've been trying to make the most of this situation, trying to, like you said, you don't want to be doing a job you don't want to be doing. Like it makes you miserable.
But
And
you
I know.
gotta eat.
well, and that ties into the point I was getting at. It came back in, and that was that for once in everybody's lifetime, this situation popped up where they didn't have to worry about. There was an exit. You know what I'm saying? There was an opportunity to be able to live a life that you wanted to live with the cushion of going, okay, well, I know there's going to be money coming in. I know I'm going to be able to pay bills. I know I'm going to be able to have food to eat. And I'm going to be able, good until this certain day and all this stuff. So I can go out here and just like you were saying, I can try something new. I can do all this because a lot of like, especially like in the arts and in celebrities and stuff, you break it down and you find a lot of these people have really rich parents. So this is that cushion that they've had their whole life that they could go out and they could try something and they could be bold and try a dream. And if they fail at it, they have a cushion to fall back with some money to get them by until they find something that's their thing. And it would probably be within the field that their parents or, however they did it. And I feel like that's why, all these and there's, and to me, there's also a flip side to this because I also think that a lot of people that have been working these shitty jobs that have not closed down, what has ended up happening, we've all kept working, and now that places started opening back up, that laid a bunch of people off, and they're starting to open back up and rehire again. These people that are still working are the ones that are going, well, fuck, I want to work there. I want to get a career job and get a better paying job and stuff, and they're getting these jobs, and then all these little fast food gas station Dollar General, all these jobs are losing all these people left and right and can't hire anybody because people are just going to getting better jobs. So,
yeah. And I think it's a bigger conversation to be had just on
the
way things are set up in America and all that. Because in a weird way, like I've always seen like everything that's happening right now is like in a weird way, a bunch of Americans are actually getting to live the American dream in a sense right now. It's like, isn't this what it's supposed to be about? Shouldn't we be able to chase our dreams and shit like that? Shouldn't we be able to breathe and fucking be able to live? You know what I mean? Like just to rest easy knowing that we're taken care of and that we're not going to have to break ourselves to maybe have enough food to feed our kids and stuff like that. And for once, people have that, and it's like you can't blame them, especially when especially a lot of those minimum wage jobs, the way they treat people sometimes is like, now wait a minute, you can't be treating employees like that. But the moment an employee tries to step up for themselves and be like, no, I don't like that, they're like, well, great, you can fucking go find another job then. It's like, well, shit, that ain't cool, And I think people are just tired of it.
Yeah.
And that's definitely, but it's a much bigger conversation.
It is. It's a battle between us and the corporations because I also have this hunch that right now they're all figuring out how to work with minimal employees so that when the unemployment is up and people are looking for jobs, that they'll be like, oh, well, we already got that figured out. We don't need that many employees now.
Well, that you're touching on another point that a book by Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote *Sapiens*, but this is one that he wrote after it. It's supposed to be about where he thinks humanity's going, and he talks about there's several options, and one of them he talks about is we could literally be going to a future where our economics don't require human input. So there's several things that can be kind of scary or interesting about that. Meaning, if there's a lot of really powerful people who just don't need us to like make money and have things like picture a really strong centralized power with a lot of autonomous robots that can just start making moves, making things happen, that ship autonomously, approve sales autonomously. What do people do then? And he's like, human populations, no one's going to know what to do with them. There's been a few kind of examples of what happens when people have like mass kind of not necessarily unemployment, but like not a whole lot. One which he points to is a population in the world which is basically chosen to be like extremely exclusively like religious and kind of live in like pseudo poverty. And he's like, this might be considered the model citizen of the future if everything's cyberized, which is, you know, one of many kind of weird possibilities. Like with all those jobs gone, what do you do with billions of people? Like Andrew Yang had the platform of like one of the first things to go he thought was going to be truck driving. Huge segment of the population. Like those people are going to need money. They're going to need stuff to do. They're going to probably want to live their lives, like feed their families, do fun stuff still. And if all of that costs money, but those jobs just poof gone,
Yeah.
there's a real gap. There's going to be a need that's unmet, and I'm really hopeful that conversations like this are happening more globally because I think now that we're communicating globally and we're starting to hopefully think more globally, I think we should be kind of aligning our goals so that way it's not just like we're getting people in America fed. It's like meeting the idea of Maslow's basement, you know, food, clothing, shelter, housing, like basic safety and security, like met on what we can consider a global level and not necessarily to what would be considered Eurocentric European standards. Like not everything has to look the same or be the same, but just like you want shelter, you've got something appropriate for the climate. You want food, got something local. Water, cool. Security, that's where things that's where it gets kind of tough to me. But these are kind of the things that I think we need to be talking about moving forward. And hopefully, in my eyes and mind, that a situation like this, if people have more time with the pandemic to kind of reflect on what they want to be doing, it would be building systems or making things like that kind of the norm, hopefully, because that's the stuff that I would argue most humans should derive meaning from, is stuff that kind of helps keep us going in a productive way. And rant.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just reading today about the virus having some variants that are out now and whatnot, and them saying that with a lot of people not taking their time getting vaccinated and stuff, that it's going to be a long time now before we're done with this, because all these variants are now starting to pop up, and they're like, man, if more people would hit that shot, we'd be good. It's like, damn, every day it changes.
Yeah, but this might be one of the most political mental health Mondays we've ever had.
Well, I was hopefully not getting too political, but we also kind of touched on, I think you're with the virus, that kind of leads to fear of, and we were talking about that a lot before this. Like, at some level, I think it's important and helpful. I mean, the Stoics would talk about like memero morte, like I totally butchered that, but like think about dying, like just accept that that's, I said earlier, almost a certain likelihood because I've seen Altered Carbon. I'm kind of hoping I get uploaded into the Matrix, but I'm like, there's a 0.0001% chance that I'm assuming. Like,
Yo.
Otherwise I'm just assuming. It makes sense to just like know that worst case scenario, everything you do, there's the possibility of death. You could just be hit by a bus in your own apartment because literally stuff like that does happen. Airplanes fall out of the sky. Like just dismiss the illusion of complete control because there's no such thing. And it makes taking action a little bit easier because you're just like, if everything, brushing my teeth is not quite as risky as taking the bus or deep sea scuba diving,
Right.
but there is a similar end risk, and it's just not being here 6 seconds later.
And it's definitely that perspective thing again. Because he and I, we were talking on this earlier, and I even told him, I said, it's actually kind of funny that this hasn't crossed my mind watching all of these Saw movies this week. Because that's literally like the whole thing. Oh, that's funny. It's probably not likely that you'll get hit by a bus in your apartment, but living as high up as you do. But an airplane, you know, it could be, you know, a fucking rogue bird. You don't know. That's what he's trying to say.
It could be some Fast and Furious shit. You never know.
Right? You never know when fucking the ghost of Paul Walker is going to come ramping a Lamborghini through your apartment.
Now, I only brought up that vaccine stuff because when I was reading this was a Facebook post that they were saying all this on, and you get to see the flip. I mean, on that of people commenting on that, saying how they were actually saying stuff like, I hope businesses start implementing passport, like you have to have vaccines to go inside. I hope they tax people that choose not to get vaccinated. People were saying all kinds of stuff on there, and it's scary to see both sides of the coin, if you ask me there. That is like, these people trying to crack down, and it's almost like, I'm not for telling people how to live their lives like that, but I don't know, man. I'm not in that position to make those decisions, and I'm glad I ain't.
Oh yeah, I mean it's tough. I told him earlier, like the mask thing. It's like, people are upset. It's like the people that are upset about it. It is what it is. But like, I can understand more not wanting to put something in your body and taking it back. Like, okay, sure, I can understand that over the just put a fucking mask on. But I don't know how I feel about the whole you're not going to be allowed into the grocery store if you're not vaccinated. Like that sounds like kind of, that gets into a conversation of freedom, that I'm kind of like.
It sounds post-apocalyptic.
Yeah.
Like, this is how you create like a subclass of people, which has historically never worked really well for any people who is in the subclass. Like, that doesn't go
well. But I was saying before that, definitely when we were having this conversation earlier about this, like, anything could happen. You could die at any moment, sort of thing. And kind of like, I mean, you sold me on the vaccine, the other day with you. It was a hell of a speech. I was like, all right, I bet I'll go get it. It's like, if it kills me, it kills me. But it is definitely like that idea of like, we could die at any moment from anything happening is one of those things that sometimes completely incapacitates people, like with anxiety and stuff like that. That's something that, but for somebody like me, having that conversation earlier kind of opened my eyes, and I feel like that's going to be more of a cure for anxiety, where it's like, if I'm just like, I could literally die doing the dumbest shit. It is an acceptance thing. It is like, all right, whatever. I guess I'll just deal with it. I guess I'll get over that, and it is what it is. If I die tripping over my shoelaces, on a walk, and I $1 million baby to myself on something, like on the corner, it happens, but I think, I don't know, I feel like that alleviates fear for me, whereas it creates fear for some people, because then they're so worried about dying all the time. They're like that scene in Final Destination where they just tape up the room and they don't leave the room. It's like, hey, death still found them. That was the whole point of that scene.
No, like that's the one thing, I don't know, it's the one thing that's always comforted me is no matter what.
Yeah, there's a worst case and you know it.
Well, no, I mean, no matter who, every single person you will ever meet, they're all going to die. Every one of them. You know what I'm saying? Like to me, that's like, I get scared about it, but then it's like everybody that I can think of right now, I can start listing names until the end of this episode. No matter who I list, they ain't going to live forever. Everybody's going to die. We're all going to have to experience that.
Albert Einstein, Kanye West.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
No, it does not matter. Like, it's one of those, when I was a kid, it was the Doors that hit me with a line with Jim Morrison saying, no one here gets out alive. And it was like, yeah, that's true. Like not anybody here is going to make it out alive. No matter what we do, that's it. That's our end. That's everybody's end right now. Spoiler alert.
Right. One of the
So
Van Wilder. Like,
well, it's been like that, like
Yeah.
if I go fail at this, oh well, like fuck it, and that's been a lot of my thoughts on a lot of things. Like shit, in 100 years, pretty much any of this bullshit that I've done ain't gonna matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying about not letting that fear of death dictate you, because then, yes, Einstein is already dead, as is Abe Lincoln, but not Kanye West. But eventually.
I hope not.
But you have something in common with Einstein. You can always tell people that. You have two things in common with Albert Einstein. We all do right now. Okay. One, you came out of a woman. Okay. We all came out of a woman. And two, eventually we'll die, but we all die. You got two things in common.
But it's like you can let that fear dictate your life, and then now you've just wasted all of this time in your life worrying about dying rather than just going and living. Which again, I keep bringing it back to Saul, and that was his old fucked up thing. Is like, well, let me put you in a situation. These are extremes, but like, let me put you in a situation where you're going to leave here appreciating your life. Because you're put in a situation where you are looking death right in the face. And that was, it's twisted, it's fucked up, it's flawed. I don't agree with it. Don't start locking people in traps and having them fight for their life just to prove a point. But because that does make you a killer. But it does, it is an interesting message.
Well,
for sure.
This actually syncs up well with some other things that I didn't actually mention, but I think we might have talked about in the past, and I brought up recently to a mutual friend of ours, Humbly G. But just the idea of fear setting. The thing that Tim Ferriss talks about in Tools for Titans, he says one of the things that helps get him motivated to do things, he does it, I think, monthly. He just says, what am I afraid of? Like, what's actually the worst likely thing? Now, not worst possible, because if worst possible is usually death, or you can start imagining Saw scenarios. That's not entirely useful, but it's just like,
no.
If I go and try and do this, like, I'll end up without a place to sleep. But I have a dope sleeping bag. So this is the exact example from the book. He's like, I like camping and oatmeal. So, like, if I go broke, I can probably maybe not have it the worst. But the opposite end of that coin is also looking at what you're doing right now and being like, well, why am I afraid to change this? Is this actually good for me? It's taking a lot of time to self-reflect. That's most of what I think mental health stuff is looking inward, trying to figure out, like, what's not actually helping me move forward. And the thing is, a lot of people get hung up on stuff that they've done in the past. And you have to generally let that go, because there's a great book that is mentioned. One of the things that is extremely useful is everything you've done has got you to at least here. So you've been successful enough to make it to a point where you're here. From here, now what? And that's where self-reflection comes in, because then you can figure out what actually makes you feel good, what actually makes you happy, what is going to serve your kind of long-term, the whole idea of self-actualization in, like, Maslow's hierarchy terms. What's going to take you there? And that's what you're trying to, like, aim for.
Yeah, I believe last week when John was here on the show, earlier we were talking about toxic positivity, but last week we were talking about people, basically a different rendition of the toxic positivity conversation, where people get too hung up on the positive and don't want to embrace the negative. But the negative is almost more necessary. The positive is the reward. That's what John was saying. The positive parts of your life are the reward for going through the negative, and the negative is where you're going to learn. That's where you're going to move forward. That is where you're going to thrive and grow, is those moments.
Well, and also there's kind of perspective again, because two things that made me think of. One was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle things. I think the opening line is, the knife kills, but it also creates. It's kind of a different way of framing a silver lining. Like, bad things happen, but also, like, every act of destruction is also kind of an act of creation, and vice versa. So, like, there's a little bit of destruction in everything we do, and sometimes we just kind of have to get over it.
Yeah, I actually I thought of one today along those lines, a little saying. because I was thinking on superhero movies and superhero stories in general. And I was reading on the Great Lakes Avengers today, and I was reading through Mr. Immortal's like story and stuff. And I'm like, damn, these guys go through it. The Great Lakes Avengers are going through some shit. But if it's one thing that is for sure when it comes to superhero stories, it's that the good guys always win, right? But the other thing that's always true is the good guys always win, but the bad guys always come back. You know, there's always going to be another threat. There's always going to be more bad shit thrown at you. So you might succeed, but you also need to prepare that there's still going to be times where you're going to fail, you're going to lose, you're going to, there's going to be those bad guys who pop up in life. It ain't going to be a constant, because otherwise, what's the point of heroes if there's,
No, but I feel like you could have a positive mindset going through the negatives. You can definitely, there are people that maybe ignore it and stuff like that, but it's always been about grow through what you go through. And if when you're in a negative situation, you can still, like I said, have that positive look through it, even though you're accepting the negative and you're in it and you're feeling that emotion, but you're still like, okay, I'm learning from this. I'm going to do better. I'm going to change this or whatever. To me, those are positive ways to move through negative situations.
Right. But I think there's something to be said for, like, I don't think repressing emotions generally a good idea, but in times of crisis, like the pilot who landed that airplane in the Hudson, he had to suppress panic to kind of derive a situation of how to keep that thing from collapsing. Mm-hmm. And apparently afterwards he slept for like 2 or 3 days. I mean, I know I've had stressful situations, like a car engine literally explodes in the highway, and I was super chill during that. But I went home and I was just like, I had to de-stress like all the weird, like, because your body freaks out and you have to like, no, we can't right now. So if you can suppress things, like, they're gonna come back out. And it's part of, I think, a lot of like what yoga tries to teach people is releasing that, letting it go, finding a place where it's like safe to do so. Because if you don't, it happens without your control. It also, mm-hmm. But yeah, and then I wanted to mention we're talking about fear, and I guess like a little bit of just not everything being perfect. That also applies to the self. The whole idea of like having a shadow. Oh man, there's a psychologist whose name I am blanking, but it'll probably come back in like a few seconds. That was one of his big things, was just like, you're not perfect. You have to understand that you have like drives and needs and wants, and like part of the negotiation of society is like maybe to suppress that a little bit. And it's owning that that's part of you and finding a way to like integrate that. Like, how do you get those desires met in a way that's like healthy and doable, and like not going to harm yourself, others? Like, humanity has a violent, tragic, weird, crazy history that's like all a little bit built into us. So it's just like understanding that like every person, self included, is, I like to think of it as everyone's a loaded gun, because they can be, and it's not any fault. It's just what we are. We are animalistic by nature, despite being extremely rational.
Yeah. Something else from last week, when you're talking about things that like scare you essentially, and that fear and everything. John said something last week that kind of stuck with me, and I had to start asking myself that, because he was talking about anxiety. People with anxiety, it's usually just a case of fear. So he said where he works, if somebody's feeling anxious about something, they ask, well, what is it you're afraid of? And honestly, that alone, I started incorporating that into my own life. When I start feeling anxious about something, now I'm stopping and I'm asking myself, what is it that's scaring me right now? Should I be scared by this? I was just telling Easy that like the other day, I had a day where I'm just like, man, I got nothing done, or I just felt like I was being lazy or whatever. But like by the end of the day, I look back, I'm like, I actually did so much. Like so much. I even had a friend who was like, I don't know how you keep all this straight. Like, I don't know how you do all this. I'm like, because it's what I want to do. This is what I want to be doing with my life. And so that kind of helps, But I was telling him a lot of that stress is self-made. A lot of that is like me spending the day being like, oh my God, there's so much stuff that needs to be done, but I only did this and this. And it's like, I still got this list of things I haven't gotten done. Like, oh, well, the Chase and Shep merch isn't up yet, so I guess, today was a big old failure because I didn't get that done, but it's like you can't judge yourself off of the things, like that. It's easy to be like, here's what I didn't do, here's what I did wrong, but sometimes you do have to take that step back and be like, no, here's what you got accomplished today. And that's going to make tomorrow so much easier, not having all that stuff there. And I know that day was a lot of fear. It was all that anxiety I was feeling is a lot of fear for the future. It's a lot of looking at our plate and seeing everything we got coming and the job situation and stuff like that. And it's just like, man, what's going to happen? But like you were just saying about the sleeping bag thing, that was something I'm like, okay, well, what am I afraid of here? Okay, well, I'm afraid not going to have an income, and then I'm going to be broke, and then what? And then I had to run myself through that process of what that might look like. And the conclusion I came to is that I will be fine. I will be okay. Like, no matter what happens, like, I'll be all right. It's, like you said, get the sleeping bag, we're going camping. Like, I don't think that's what it's going to come down to for me. But it's one of those things that when you look at what truly is the worst case scenario, I do think it helps.
Yeah, for sure. Depends on the situation.
Right.
If you wake up every day and you're like, I'm going to die, that's probably not a good way to live.
No.
That's self-talk's actually remarkably important for part of anxiety, fear, PTSD. Some of that leads to changes in the shape and function of the brain. Just form tends to follow function, and if something gets enlarged because we're used to having like a really quick, snappy fear reaction, for a really long time, actually up until quite recently, scientists were like, yeah, that's pretty much undoable. But a book by the name Aware by Dr. Dan Siegel is like, this can be reversed, undone. It just takes kind of a lot of work. But it's one of his main arguments is that one of the few things humans knowingly actually control is kind of the electrical current that's whipping around here. And there's a lot of things that modify that. Substances you take, alcohol being one of them, psychedelics being another, cannabis, all of that is going to impact how that pathway feels and where it's flowing. But to an alarming degree, we actually have a great deal of control of what's going on here and how we direct that, how we literally direct that energy, and quite literal energy is going to shape the pathways and structures of how we do all of our thinking, behaving, and perceiving. So what you're saying internally and externally to yourself is being reinforced by layers of fat around the neurons. And what you say to yourself matters over time. It's one of the reasons I've always argued that the military has things like creeds. So that way you maintain your arms, your equipment, and yourself. It's more likely to do it if you say it, and if you say it out loud, and if there's group other people witnessing it, because then you feel compelled to do so for social reasons. All of that helps shape who you are and how you act in the world. And it's a thing that a lot of people want to banish into the frou-frou self-help land, but we've got evidence to say that this actually does impact gray matter.
Yeah, I've read before, it's the whole how do you I forget what book, it was something on Buddhism, and it was talking about how do you speak to yourself, what does your inner monologue sound like. It's probably one of those.
Yeah, it's I see Buddhist boot camp,
but
the Tao of physics, the Tao Te Ching.
But it is when you're like the example I just gave about the other day, me being so hard on myself. That's something I have to ask myself, how do I speak to myself in those moments? Am I hard on myself? Am I like an asshole to myself about what I do and do not get done? Or, do I talk to myself with kind, loving care? The answer is no. I don't. It's something I need to work on. I've gotten better about it. I'm not as bad as some people who just tear themselves apart, all the time. And just tell themselves that they're worthless and they're this and they're that, and it's just I don't believe in any of that. But there's definitely something to it.
Though. I mean, it's super part of the whole idea of imposter syndrome is you're new to a place and you don't feel like you're good enough. But it's hello, you're new.
Right.
The first time you do something, if you're good at it, you're a freak. That's unusual. the first time you do something, you should kind of suck generally, unless you just really, really like Bruce Lee in control of your body. Which, like, again, an argument from that book Aware is like the more you spend time focusing your attention to integrate your brain to your nervous system and physiology, the better the whole package works, the brain and the body. So there's a little Bruce Lee even in the psychology, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, Bruce Lee. Nah, I think that plays into a lot though, man, because even the meme culture these days it's self-deprecating is a big thing and people like it. And I think that plays into how you view yourself, how you see yourself, and then you mold yourself based upon that. So if you see yourself as a baller, rad ass individual, that's what you're going to become, and that's how other people will start perceiving you as well.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of like, you know, we've sort of been talking a little bit on the Chase and Shep situation lately, and you know, I've wanted to approach it with this new mentality of like, you know what, I don't. It's not like a cocky or arrogant. Like I'm not trying to be like, oh, we're hot shit. Like, no, it's like let me just act like I'm a professional. Like, let me just pretend like, you know, we are on that level when I'm trying to be on that level. You know, because it comes across more of I'm putting out what it is that I want to be. Right? You know, like sort of thing. And it's not going to get there by telling yourself, oh well, you know, you're not that person. You know, you're not going to be that person. You got to be somebody else or you have to, you know, all that shit. And it's like it's a process, you know. Like I said,
well, it's crazy. It's like it's the whole. It is literally I think the crux of the idea of where like faith comes from is making anything happen in reality is frigging nuts. It is a miracle that we can communicate to each other, let alone cooperate and get things to happen. And because it's fascinating to me that we have a shared language. It's remarkable. And to make things happen collaboratively is also just a friggin' miracle. But it's so. I mean, we've got people who've landed rockets simultaneously who are building all sorts of crazy stuff, and it all started as someone was like, "That's friggin' impossible because it's never been done," and like, well, that's where everything meaningful starts, is in that realm of complete BS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of dope stuff started with people being told they couldn't do it.
NASA, Michael Jordan.
Plenty of times. I don't know about Michael Jordan though. I think
cut from his first basketball team, or is that? I'm probably just making that up.
I think they knew he was pretty good from the get-go.
Even Bugs Bunny was dropping disses at Michael on that track I remixed last night, talking about his baseball career.
Well, baseball, that's different.
He's like, Jordan at the plate, he's gonna miss every time or something like that is the line. I was like, that's pretty great.
I've always said, man, like with my son, if I would have all his whole life, like when he was a kid, like starting at like age 4, when he got in trouble, been like, go out back and make 15 free throws in a row and come inside.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You can once you do that and all that kind of stuff. I was like, man, if you did that when a kid was 4, I've been like, all right, dude, here's a skateboard. When you can land a kickflip, you can come back inside.
Right.
And you're gonna have the next fucking Tony Hawk on your hands. You know what I'm saying? If you have him go play basketball, you'd have the next LeBron, the next Michael, the next Kobe. You know, you go make them fucking play guitar.
And they're like,
you get the next Eddie Van Halen. You know.
Well,
and that's the shit, man. How many people do you think are really good at like basketball? That's like, man, I hate that I'm this fucking good at basketball. I hate basketball, but I'm baller.
Troy Bolton. He just wanted to sing.
Might as well. Why does Mel, you know, make those mills?
I mean, a lot of super dominant pro athletes right now. The Venus and Serena Williams, Tiger Woods. They started super young. Which I think, I mean, tons of time to refine. But there's also,
I was gonna say, this starts to edge into the conversation of abusive parenthood too.
Well, like child prodigy who was hearing piano in the room, is that abuse or is that like a dope kid? Like
Well, I think that's a little different. I think maybe not the Williams sisters. I felt like the Williams sisters had.
I don't think there's always going to be people who overdo stuff. I think most of the. I don't know well enough. I've never met the family.
Or maybe it is. I don't know. I think that's the movie Will Smith's getting ready to be in, where he's getting ready to play their dad or some shit. Comes out later. HBO Max and IMAX. You know we're gonna be talking about it on old Chase and Shep. It's a little. HBO
Maybe you'll be talking about
Maybe
that.
I will. Maybe you don't give a shit.
Doesn't sound like one that I'll be dying to pop in. Unfortunately,
Could be lit. Who knows? King Richard.
Yeah.
But it looks like we're getting about that time. So we got any closing thoughts here, boys?
Oh man, I feel like I had something. Then you asked a question, and I was like, and it's gone. So yeah, I'll just give me a minute. I'll have something.
Shep?
Don't be too positive.
Tone that shit down, boys and girls.
No, keep that shit to yourself.
It was something Shep said about, if starting young, sort of, or I think you might have implied. There's definitely tons of grinding does help sharpen skill, but again, that book Drive talks about the idea of mastery. Like a few things are really necessary to like master, and one's the idea, like the belief internally that you're never going to fully get something perfect because mastery is like an endless pursuit. Number two is good tools, like to measure what you're doing. Like if you're not getting really good feedback about how you're performing, then you're not going to be improving as well as you could be. As that's one of the reasons privilege tends to kind of roll and spiral out of control. Is you get better ways to measure what you're doing, then you perform better, then you measure better, then you perform better, and the advantage just aggregates over time. But yeah, if anything that you want to do, like put in the work, but also like measure and make sure that you are actually getting better.
So start telling the kids they suck, because at 4 years old, nobody's good at fucking baseball, nobody's good at basketball, nobody's good at soccer. So start being like, you suck. You got a lot of work, kid.
Yeah. One of my favorite, Pete Davidson had this joke not too long ago about get it like when he was like in his 20s and people being like, oh, like the first girl you have sex with or something, like talking shit on you. And he's just like, I'm in my 20s. It's like, I'm like an amateur basketball player. Like, you got to learn. It's like, you don't just pick up a guitar and you're like, Santana. He's like, you got to practice. It's like, you're the first person I ever did this with. Of course I don't know what I'm doing. Like, of course you can go talk shit. But yeah, it's definitely, you got to practice, man. Nobody's perfect your first time.
I always made that argument with buddies, man. You don't want to go see the band that just got on stage for the first time tonight. You want to go see that band that's been on about 15 world tours.
Well, even the Beatles, I've read that one of their, before they crossed over into the US, they had a crazy schedule of their manager, I think. I heard he made him play like basically anywhere, which led to being in a lot of German strip clubs, just playing because they were like, we'll take like basically free music. And they weren't great at first, but after doing it like 1,000 times, by the time that they hit the US, they were so polished and ready and practiced and like on it, and apparently having fun most of the time. So like digging it, everything you need to kind of hit end with perfect timing.
The Beatles had that career that everybody wants because they stopped touring before they got like mega star status, and was like, nah, tour. Nah. We ain't doing no more tours. We're too big. We're too popular to do tours now. So, nah.
It's too much driving.
But I did see Paul McCartney play, so that was a bucket list one to see, because if it wasn't for the Beatles, I wouldn't be here. That's what my dad told me. So,
well, remember, kids, if you're not perfect, that's perfectly fine. That's just how it is.
You got to grow through what you go through.
Right. You made it this far.
Right. You've been successful up until this point. No point stopping now.
Might as well just keep kicking.
Another exciting Mental Health Monday in the books. Another fantastic guest. Easy, thank you for joining us today. We got another fantastic guest next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. We're going to always have our guests here at Mental Health Mondays, except for when we don't. Peace, everybody.